Some characters just deserve better. Some figures are so steeped in legacy that when they finally return, expectations are unavoidable. The Phantom is one of those, a pulp legend, a masked vigilante who predates Batman, a character seemingly designed for the interactive space. Yet the Phantom on the Nintendo Switch doesn't just fumble the opportunity, it faceplants, stumbles forward, and never quite finds its footing. Now this isn't the Phantom's first video game, but it's been a long time since he had a real shot. The last attempt, a Game Boy Advance title that never even saw release. That's how long it's been. And with such a rich universe, jungle expeditions, high-tech villains, centuries of crime-fighting history, there was always potential for a modern, stylish revival. Instead, the Phantom feels half-finished, structurally outdated, and entirely unworthy of the ghost who walks. But how bad is it really? Let's break it down. If you enjoyed today's review, do me a favour, subscribe, helps out the channel a huge amount. Storytelling in a side-scrolling beat-em-up is rarely the main draw, and Phantom follows suit. The feared Singh Brotherhood is on the rise, threatening the Phantom's legacy and, in the process, kidnapping his son. Now as either the Phantom or Diana Palmer, you set off on a globe-trotting mission to get him back. It's a familiar hook, framed through comic book style panels that at least capture the right aesthetic, even if the storytelling never does much with it. Basically, it's functional but forgettable, a premise that serves its purpose without ever embracing the depth of the Phantom's mythology. Now if the gameplay was fluid, responsive and impactful, this wouldn't be a problem, but that's where things begin to unravel. So as a lifelong fan of arcade beat-em-ups, I tend to dive into every single one that hits the Switch and frankly, all systems. But I never go in with high expectations. The genre has seen its peaks, with Shredder's Revenge and Streets of Rage 4 standing as modern greats, yet it's also a playground for smaller developers, where games like The Takeover have carved out their own space. I mention this because I want to be clear, I don't come in expecting a masterpiece. I've played plenty of mid-tier beat-em-ups and found things to enjoy, but Phantom, it is a mess. Now spread across 14 stages, you'll control the Phantom or Diana, though calling them distinct characters feels generous. They share the same basic moveset, with only minor visual flourishes to really differentiate them. In practice, it's less like choosing between unique fighters and more like swapping skins. Now the combat then is simplistic, with little room for depth or experimentation, and the entire experience lasted me around 2 hours. Possibly it would have been closer to 1 if not for the game's persistent issues. Now is there anything to praise? It's a question I honestly struggle with. The animal summons are a nice touch. The Phantom calls upon a wolf while Diana wields an eagle, but beyond that, the game kind of hovers between mediocre and outright bad. So let's get into it and settle in. It's a long list. First, the controls. At best, they're unresponsive. At worst, they simply don't do what they're supposed to. There's a power meter beneath your health bar that theoretically fuels special moves, but it seems to function about half the time. Even the basics feel clunky. Then there's no in-game option to actually check the controls. It's only from the main menu, so you'll need to memorize them before diving in. Apparently as well, different directions and button inputs should trigger special attacks. In practice, I'd estimate about 50% success rate. Then there's the grab, or at least what I assume is meant to be a grab. In most beat-em-ups, it's simple. Walk into an enemy and you've got them. Here, it seems to have a mind of its own. Maybe 1 in 10 attempts actually works, and when it does, it's not because of anything I did, it just decided to function. At a certain point, I stopped even trying to use it. There's no strategy when the mechanics themselves don't want to cooperate. The core moveset then is as basic as it gets. A light attack, a heavy attack, and a handful of weak specials. There's also a gun, but calling it underwhelming would be generous. It might be one of the weakest firearms in video game history. It barely scratches enemies, which is especially frustrating given that the handful of enemy types present are complete damage sponges. They just drag out encounters here for way longer than necessary. Now fortunately, I will say this, they're not particularly bright. This is one of the easiest beat-em-ups in recent memory, not because the combat is well balanced, but because that AI is just non-existent. The only real challenge, fighting against the game itself. And that brings us to the hitboxes, which feel like they were determined by a random number generator. Sometimes I'd be connecting from what seemed like miles away, Other times, I'd be up close, swinging directly at an enemy, only for my attacks to register as though I'm hitting thin air. My personal favourite, the moments when enemies could hit me, but I couldn't hit them. That's always fun in the genre. This shaky combat then is paired with some of the most uninspired level design I've seen in a long time. It follows the classic left to right, beat 'em up formula, but the environments feel lifeless. Now weapons can be picked up along the way, which should add variety, but in my time across 14 levels, I found exactly 2 weapons, a branch and a bone. That is it. Then at one point, I did spot a sword, got excited, picked it up, and realised it wasn't a weapon at all. It was a collectible, just something to sit in a meaningless menu for Phantom history that no one, except for hardcore fans realistically, will ever check. Then there are the padding techniques. Several levels make you walk all the way to the right, only for the game to suddenly decide that, actually, your objective was at the entrance all along. So now you'll backtrack to the start, only to be greeted by a fresh wave of enemies on the journey. Nothing like trudging through the same lifeless corridors twice for really no reason. The game does try to break up the monotony with a few vehicle sections, but they somehow manage to be just as dull as everything else, in fact maybe worse. The Takeover did a great job incorporating chase sequences, blending them seamlessly with the action. The Phantom attempts something similar, horseback fights, car chases, a boat sequence, but each one plays out the exact same way. You follow an enemy, they throw bombs at you, you shoot them. That is it. The only thing that changes is the background. The pacing gear is off, the execution is lifeless, and what should be exciting moments just end up feeling like a chore. Then we come to the boss battles. Surely a beat 'em up should at least get those right. Apparently not. There are exactly 2 in the game, and neither managed to land a single hit on me. They are entirely predictable, locked into canned animations with 0 reaction to your position, and the only challenge comes from the fact that they just refuse to die. You pummel them, they drop to half health, they jump out, summon goons, regenerate their health, and repeat over and over and over. Now the game does attempt to pad things out then with extra modes, so this is actually a positive, let's say padding, but they add little to the experience. Beating the story unlocks arcade mode, which offers 3 difficulty settings, but given that the game barely functions on normal, I can't imagine a harder version is worth suffering through. There's also a 2-player co-op option, though I can't in good consciousness recommend roping a friend into this, and there's another mode, Outlast. It's locked until you complete arcade mode from what I can tell, but at this point, even curiosity couldn't convince me to go through it all again. Now let's talk about good old-fashioned technical issues. The good news, the frame rate is solid. The bad news, pretty much everything else. 3 times I got stuck in the environment, had to restart the level. Twice my character's attacks just stopped working. Running in circles for a while seemed to fix that. Not exactly ideal. The final boss then glitched out on me multiple times. Once he just never reappeared, forcing a full restart. Another time I knocked him down, he simply never got back up. This also happened earlier in the game with a random enemy and the Phantom himself, except for after about maybe 45 seconds, they both decided to stand back up. They'd had enough of their nap, and yeah, even the Phantom can't really be bothered, it seems, with the Phantom. But the worst offender, the save bug. If you quit the game mid-run, you don't reload from where you left off, you get booted back to the previous level for some unknown reason. I'm sure a simple patch could fix this, but as it stands, if you have to step away, do not quit. Just pause, and you can actually restart the level from the menu instead. I had to learn that the hard way when the game froze me in place, forcing me to reboot, only to find myself forced to replay an entire miserable, lengthy level. Alright, so at least it's pretty. So let's talk about the visuals, because for once we actually have a highlight, and it looks lovely, there is no denying that. The cartoon style is spot on, the character designs are faithful, and while minimal, the cutscenes in particular definitely capture the spirit of the Phantom's comic book roots. Animations generally hold up well too, punches land with a decent amount of weight, and movement definitely looks decent. It suggests at least some care was put into how the game presents itself. But does it have problems? Absolutely, it simply needed more. The uninspired level design isn't just an issue mechanically, it stands out visually as well. Stages are too long, rarely offering variety, and even less so a sense of progression. You'll reach the end of one area, move on to the next, and feel like nothing has actually changed. There's no real journey here, just a series of disconnected backdrops that fail to really make the adventure feel like it's building towards anything. And then, after everything, the game just kind of ends. It's a 10-second cutscene at most, and yeah, I don't know, it wasn't really a satisfying conclusion, just kind of this abrupt end. The lack of enemy variety as well does make things worse in my opinion. It's not just that there aren't many types, it's that the game doesn't even attempt to disguise it. You know, there's no TMNT style colour swap to fake variety, no subtle differences in, you know, maybe the faces, even maybe attack patterns. You'll basically be fighting the same handful of enemies in the same way over and over, and it makes an already repetitive game feel even more lifeless. Audio then is worth a quick mention. There's not much to say. Musically, it's fine, serviceable, but utterly forgettable. I put the game down and immediately struggled to recall a single track. It's kind of the definition of, you know, background noise. It does its job, you won't remember it. The voice acting, or rather the grunts, get repetitive fast. Enemies cycle through the same limited sound bites, and when you're taking on wave after wave of identical foe, it definitely becomes grating. The fully voiced cutscenes then, they lean into the cheesiness, which is expected, and in that sense, they do their job. But overall, much like the rest of the game, the audio design just kind of feels like an afterthought. I feel bad for the Phantom fans. I guess I'm fortunate. I have no deep nostalgia for the character, but even without that, it's easy to see how much this game fumbles the legacy. The Phantom is an iconic figure, and there's no reason his long overdue return to gaming should feel this undercooked. Now granted, if you are a fan, you'll probably find ways to make excuses, and I get it, I do the same thing. You know, when you've been waiting this long for a new game, you want to see the positives. And look, sure, maybe the comic book presentation works in places, maybe there's some fun to be had in co-op, but that doesn't change the reality. This is a game that is simply poor. The problems are everywhere. A more responsive combat system would have made a world of difference. Controls that actually function as they should all the time would be nice too. Level design that offers some variety, a greater enemy roster, more surprises to break up the repetition, boss fights that actually feel like, well, boss fights. And those vehicle levels, let's not just copy and paste them. Even if the devs fixed some of its immediate issues like the broken save system or the occasional game-breaking glitch, it wouldn't change the core problem. Phantom is fundamentally flawed. Combat is stiff, the level design is uninspired, and no amount of patches will make it a good game. Today, it's a bad 3 out of 10 from me. Functions, I finished it. Maybe die-hard fans will find something to enjoy, but with so many better beat-em-ups out there, there's really just no reason to play this one. So that is the Phantom. Never fun delivering a review like this one, but let me know in the comments, are you going to be checking it out? Are you a fan of the character? Maybe you parted with your cash already. If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, if you did enjoy this review, do me a favour and subscribe. That helps out the channel a huge amount. Alright, I'll see you all on the next video. Cheers all.